Hello and welcome to Innovation Unlocked. Today we'll be hearing from Matt Hunter and MichaelKorn, both successful entrepreneurs and innovators with experience developing hubs for hardware entrepreneurs. We chat about the importance of such spaces in the UK and the need to inspire the next generation of innovators.
But actually, when you see what the ideas are, you go, I had no idea you could boil up, fish waste and red algae as with Marinatex and turn that into a transparent biofilm.
This is Innovation Unlocked by Matheson Squire. Enjoy the episode. Hi, so this time I'm joined by MichaelKorn and Matt Hunter. We'll be speaking about Industry Unlocked and maybe expanding on what we mean by that, and about supporting people in place and about how we can support talent in the UK. So, Michael, you first. We met through Blue Garage. Maybe do you want to explain a little bit what Blue Garage is and what it means?
Yeah, so Blue Garage is a innovation hub to help hardware founders scale their businesses and take away the barriers that exist for so many people in this space. It's a hugely worthwhile thing for people to do, but not enough people have got access to the equipment and the funds to be able to really prototype and eventually scale a new manufacturing business. And at Blue Garage, we provide shared facilities, a really vibrant, supportive community, and connections to industry and investors like Damon Bonza, who you just had on the show.
Amazing. And what kind of businesses in particular? Is there a particular sector or area that you focus on?
We're only 1 year old, and we've been very sector agnostic. And we're specializing in the fact that we have workshops for all different types of people that are making things. So we have a huge metal workshop and a wood workshop, a screen printing, textiles lab with loads of different machines. We're building a bio lab, and it all sits on top of a factory. So you can go to Blue Garage, get your prototype developed, learn as you iterate and build, which is a philosophy that I really strongly believe in, all in the building with lots of other creative people making their products, and at the same time have access to a factory on the ground floor which can do the small batch production. But we do have people in a lot of climate tech, a lot of new materials, a lot of fashion because of the textiles focus. So we haven't yet really identified what the Lewisham site's identity is going to be going forward, but it probably will specialize in one or two certain sectors, and then hopefully we'll have Blue Garage hubs all over the country, each one with its own identity aligned to maybe the local industry strength.
I mean, so I've been to, as you know, been to Blue Garage quite a few times, and I would say there's a definite excitement and energy there. There's a lot going on. I think the fact that, as you say, it's built on a factory means that people can see, in real life what's going on, how things work, and then sort of see how things can evolve and develop into that. So that, for me, that's really interesting. And I think you've built up almost like sort of a snowball effect now, and actually it's getting that momentum, and there's a lot of energy and buzz about that. So congratulate you on that. And, let's come back to that in a minute. But yeah, it's really exciting. Matt, in a sort of similar vein, we met actually through the Central Research Laboratory, CRL. Yeah. Maybe can you explain a little bit about that and a bit about your background?
Yeah. So Central Research Laboratory, or CRL, started 10 years ago, 2015. Wow. And I was actually doing something at the time. I was Chief Design Officer at the Design Council at the time, working with a guy called John Mathers, who was the Chief Exec of the Design Council, now Chair of the British Design Fund. We were working on something called Design Council Spark, which was a fund and a sort of accelerator program for early stage product people. And two things came out of that. One is someone who I was involved with there said, hey, there are some property developers over in West London that I think could do with your help. And the other is that ultimately British Design Fund was set up as a follow-on fund really for Design Council Spark. So back to the CRL, what was interesting was some very creative forward-thinking developers, ultimately became known as You and I, had this patch of land in West London, 12 acres. And it was near Heathrow Airport, but it was really sort of quite derelict. And it was called London Gate, wherever that was. But some really good developers understand that actually every place has a history. It has heritage you want to bring forward. And of course, this wasn't just any place. This was the epicenter of EMI Records manufacturing sort of factory, and also R&D. And so what was interesting was not only did they press the sort of Beatles and Stones records, but actually they made the record players as well. And to make the record players, you needed to build technology. And of course, a record player is a media device. So then they started making TV cameras, they commercialized stereo sound. And then it got a bit more freaky that they made healthcare innovations. And so this amazing R&D lab, EMI's R&D lab, called the Central Research Laboratory, invented the CAT scanner. So Godfrey Hounsfield and his team won a Nobel Prize for this amazing invention that has, revolutionized healthcare. Anyway, so we knew what the heritage was, and working with the developers, we had to say, okay, what's the modern version of an R&D lab? Let's make a new version of the CRL, and we're going to make that a startup incubator for hardware. And it was all set up, of course, with local universities as well. Brunel University being the closest because they've got a great engineering heritage, but also Royal College of Art, Kingston University, Imperial College and others. So really the point is here, this was an amazing place where talented graduates in these design and engineering fields could be supported just in the same way Michael was saying. But the benefit was that it would activate this patch of land because it was derelict. We knew we could sell off land to make houses. Everyone knows in London you can make money out of houses. The problem is office space. And so ultimately the strategy was to invite these exciting entrepreneurs, as you said. You can see this stuff happening. This is so visible, so exciting, so energetic. You're in the ground floor of a 100,000 square foot building. You're going to activate it. And this means ultimately that the value of the building will go up. People will be able to sell the building, plow the money back into the development, and ultimately do the very hard yards of building a space. So ultimately what we were doing was very similar to Blue Garage, but it had a very particular real estate strategy because, and we'll come on to this, one of the key questions is how do you make this pay? This is something often where you're dealing with very early stage businesses and it's a sort of on the edge of a commercial proposition, and really what it needs is some collaboration via interested parties, fellow travelers. And in this case, we decided that actually to collaborate not only with the local authority, Hillingdon Borough Council, but also some real estate developers was the way to make this sustainable.
Amazing. Matt, I don't know if I've ever told you before, but I've also got a personal connection to the Central Research Laboratory. So my dad actually worked there.
Oh, fantastic.
So I remember going there when I was a child, going into the old CRL site and looking around it. So it's been kind of funny, but nice coming back to the site and seeing actually some of that innovation that's still going on.
And the history. So I equally, there was a wonderful plaque unveiled, several years later, let's say 2014, 2015. Sorry, 2019, with people flying in from across the US to celebrate particular things. And so again, it's one of those unfortunate things that's happened in the UK, let's say, over the last 20, 30 or more years. All this amazing pioneering work, all this history, all these amazing people have been lost in time. And so there is a sort of a sense of heritage of sort of reawakening something that really did get hammered as all of the manufacturing moved eastwards to Asia.
Yeah. So we're talking a bit about place there. Why is place-based innovation so important to the UK's innovation ecosystem, do you think?
Well, I think one of the things that many people have observed is that in theory, you could carry on with the rather sort of, with a country where London is just a sort of a massive outperforming bit of the economy. But the problem is that means a couple of things. One is wages are a lot higher in London, and then people migrate from other bits of the country, like you've tilted the whole of the UK up on its edge because people are coming to where the good jobs are, right? And that's politically unacceptable. And at the same time, we know that manufacturing is important. I don't know where we are in the global rankings these days. We used to be 10th, maybe we were 11th. Might be even be 11th still.
Yeah. We used to be 6th.
That's higher than I thought, to be fair.
Well, exactly. It's higher than many people
That's what the minister
think.
said we are. So. Yeah.
It's higher than many people think. But ultimately, I suppose, in this world of fragile global supply chains, shifting politics, wars, all the rest of it, we want both to have much more productivity and great jobs all across the UK. And for all of those reasons around our heritage and the global context, why should manufacturing be part of that?
And manufacturing jobs are better, and manufacturing companies have a ripple effect on the economy and the local economy. So to support them just is such an important thing to do, and they're under-supported because investors tend to look for the They don't necessarily understand, or they're overly scared by what they think is a risky proposition, and maybe it is risky because we're not supporting these early manufacturing businesses. So that whole, if that can be changed, which I think it can be changed, and we're making a good case for that, then a very exciting future for the UK.
Yeah, I think that's really important to say that, there's often this commentary that the UK is very good at science but doesn't commercialize it. Well, similarly, we are exceptionally good at design and engineering education. So we have got great talent. Indeed, many of these people may be from the UK, but many of them are from around the world. I mean, a huge number of Chinese students coming in to learn from us about how you design and engineer. So if we've got this amazing talent stream in the UK as well, why on earth are we not making the most of that national asset? So I think it's also thinking about the talent streams and how to maximize the benefit rather than them either, traveling abroad or actually finding employment in some different industry and having to go into, finance, hospitality. Who knows what they might do if they don't use their engineering.
Yeah, banking. So, and they're in London. So like in terms of the placemaking element, so many of these creative, entrepreneurial startup businesses, they're starting in London. That's where there's so many universities. That is that there is a concentration in London. But the challenge that we found is that in London, there aren't the physical spaces to build and prototype and start your business. If that exists, which it does now with Blue Garage, then there is a much greater chance that as those businesses scale and need follow-on space and actually want to set up a manufacturing facility, it's maybe not going to be in London, it will be somewhere else in the UK. So it allows the placemaking in the rest of the country to survive. And so that's what we're trying to do. And there are so many people in Blue Garage who, they're having to juggle both getting their talent visa to stay in the UK and at the same time start their business and at the same time keep all of the costs and raise money. And the people that can do that need to be supported.
So Matt, I think you alluded to this earlier, but community engagement and community building, how important is that? And how do you engage the local community in what it is that you're trying to do?
Yeah, I always think there are some great words like innovation, collaboration, and community, which are so easy to say and so difficult to get right, and indeed used glibly the whole time. And so focusing on that point about community, it's just amazingly powerful. You build a group of people that have common purpose. Maybe they're diverse enough in what they're trying to do that they don't get a bit edgy and nervous and sort of sharp-elbowed. So there's a sense of looseness to it and trust, which is incredibly important. And then they start helping one another. And so sometimes there's a perspective, I think, that knowledge transfer is from the kind of very knowledgeable people to the less knowledgeable people. And there's no doubt there's a huge amount of expertise that's required here. Michael was alluding to it, and therefore making that knowledge inexpensive is incredibly important. But at the same time, a lot of the knowledge is peer-to-peer. And so as soon as you get people to be supporting one another, of course, they're filling in the gaps that each other has. And at the same time, they're sort of solidifying what they know. And there's a lot of evidence that says if you teach, actually it solidifies what you know. The act of teaching is very good for the teacher, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there's something incredibly powerful about building these communities. And more than anything, when they are these communities that need physical space because of the need for equipment or storage or whatever it is, then you get very, very powerful places. And so we found again and again, especially when opening spaces, and we're not the only people that did this, opening a space and trying to fill it up in the middle of the 2 years of COVID pandemics and lockdowns. Actually, we determined, as others did, that it was the right thing to do to remain open with all the social distancing because people needed access to the machinery. A Plexel in the Olympic Park had the similar view. But people really came in because these small businesses that needed this sense of psychological support as much as practical support really needed to work together and to collaborate to work out how to pivot their businesses. And I think also what's really important, and this sort of comes from where we were located, both in terms of the Central Research Laboratory in Hayes, but then we had to move, unfortunately, out to Slough, where we rebranded it as Plus X.
Although it's a great building in Slough.
It's a lovely building. Well, what I mean is, it was Hayes and Hillingdon's loss to move out. That's what I mean by the sadness. But yes, great in Slough. But then you're drawing other people in as well. And so now Slough's great history of light industry and all the rest of it, you're drawing people in. So on the one hand, you build these relationships with universities, But on the other hand, you try and support people who've never been to university and self-taught or just always had an itch to work with someone on a physical thing. So in that sense, place is also wonderful because you can walk past place as you get to the bus. This is certainly what happens in Slough. We have glass walls. We're on the ground floor. People see the machinery and they go, what's that? That looks interesting. I can see a robot. Shall I walk inside? So yeah, there's an awful lot to do with place, serendipity, people bumping into one another and then helping one another, and practically, from knowledge point of view and psychologically helping one another.
Yeah, I mean, I do remember coming to Hayes, and I think it was 2020, maybe it was early 2021, and just how thirsty all the founders were for that contact and that engagement. And it was actually some of the most fruitful and productive discussions that I'd had with founders.
Well, I think, Mattison Squire's done a fantastic job. You've done a fantastic job of, as you say, sort of, feeding these thirsty, hungry people. Whereas, of course, especially, I think what's interesting about this, I think both from an IP point of view, from a manufacturer point of view, from a funding point of view, part of the trick is trying to work out what do I need in 5 years' time? How do I not make a wrong step now for something in the future? And so an awful lot of the wisdom that I think is shared is for people that have been there, done that, and seen what people need to do now so that they're not snookered, in the future. Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly important bit. And again, I think that when I think about, walking around London versus walking around Shenzhen in southern China, the density of knowledge around hardware and intellectual property and funding and all of these things is so much less strong in London for this particular specialism. And that's why these communities are important, because you're kind of agglomerating and clustering the slightly more diffuse knowledge that does exist in this amazing city. But it'd be hard to stumble over it unless you were in these hotspots.
Exactly. It's the amazing thing about London is you just got everybody here. So you can very quickly build a niche community of people super interested in something. And then, you build that cohort that supports each other. And what we've done, followed on from, what was successful at CRL and Plus X, is almost by having the right culture and the right supportive environment, it really doesn't cost a lot, but it's invaluable. And it can only be done if it's done by people who really get it and believe it and have been there. As soon as you have somebody else whose job it is to set this thing up, but it isn't the thing that they've lived, they just can't, you just can't get it right. So I think that is, and that is what needs to happen to nurture that supportive, just like proactive, positive, and multi-generational, to be around. It's really beneficial if you are a scaling up company to be around the startup companies and the early, because there's a lot to learn from them and a huge amount for the early companies to see the success of the bigger companies and go, well, okay, I could be that. I can do what they're doing if I just keep going at it, and whatever it is, the osmosis that happens. I just think it's so important. Why place-based cohorts, hubs. This is so important.
So, Michael, we heard from Matt a little bit about how CRL was successful engaging with both academic institutions like Brunel, but also industry to sort of help sort of promote and develop and share that expertise. How have you found with Blue Garage that it's still quite early days for Blue Garage? What have you found in terms of reaching out to the community, engagement with the community, and sort of what are your plans and for that?
So Blue Garage is almost uniquely grown as a organic, bootstrapped passion out of what was my company's manufacturing facility, Quickstream. And that has and my philosophy has been very much one of open arms, come join in, me garage, S2 garage kind of thing. What would you do if this was yours? How would you want it to be used? And I've said that to everybody, be that some corporates that have donated equipment to us and said, look, this is great. We want to see this, want to support it, have a whole load of equipment from us and don't put our name to it, but just, go for it. We want to see what happens.
That's really positive.
So a lot of the equipment we've got has been donated. Universities that have said, this is exactly what our students need when they graduate, because they've got nowhere to follow on and build on their projects and start their business. And, it will take us a year to get this set up. And so we just said, don't be silly, just move them in straight away. So we've got, 3 cohorts of students in there already. And the council, so Lewisham Council said, wow, if you can actually create something that brings companies to Lewisham, puts Lewisham on the map, creates interesting jobs, and is like a melting pot of all the different communities and backgrounds and people that are in the Lewisham borough, which is an incredibly diverse borough, then let's see what you do. And so with a little bit of grant funding from them, I think we're the highest ROI project that they've supported, and they're really, encouraging us to branch out beyond Lewisham. So it was just like, let's try almost everything for everyone and see where it lands. And now we're plugging into the high value manufacturing catapult network to be able to provide them with the scale up and startup businesses that they need to engage with. But it's quite hard for them to engage with because they're a bit out of the city centres and they're all very shiny and they tend to be a bit, priced a little bit too high. And so that they need to be attracting these businesses that we're attracting. So by connecting with them, we're able to really close the circle of the UK innovation landscape. And it's been a tough year, but now we're really getting momentum, and it's all, looking like there's a lot of impact that we could now have nationwide.
And do you think governments and local authority are doing enough in this respect? Or do you think that there's areas where they're just missing a trick, or they really should be doing more? Or
I'm hugely grateful that they've supported it and it's been helpful. And so I just would say Lewisham has supported us, but we are the people we're helping are beyond Lewisham. It's, the intention is that Blue Garage becomes a network of hubs around the country. So it should be a central government supported thing, but we're definitely supporting all the London boroughs because people are travelling from, all over London, especially Southeast London, to get to Blue Garage. So if we could have a similar support from these other boroughs, I think it would be brilliant. And I think, this better than me, the tide is turning and government is understanding that this is something that is worthy of support and money is coming into it. And they recognise that supporting the founders who have been there is the right thing to do.
I think, all of the broader sort of English devolution thing, all of, be it West Midlands or Manchester Combined Authority, all of these sort of mayoralties are going to help, because I think that to some extent, when you're in Department of Business or Department of Science and you're thinking about the industrial strategy, you tend to think about these sort of 8 great technologies. It's all very hypothetical around these sort of statistically important things, and let's have some quantum and let's do some hydrogen and whatever. And this is important at the national scale. But when it lands on the ground, it can look quite different. For instance, there was some work done where the Royal Society of the Arts was supporting the East Midlands Combined Authority. And that's quite a rural area with sort of Derby and Nottingham as sort of cities. But I think they worked out something like if you got them to focus only on the industrial strategy, 8 great technologies, something like 10 or 20% of the workforce would be positively impacted by the strategy. So 80% wouldn't. So when you're a mayor of one of these areas, you have to think a little bit differently. Who do I have on my patch? How am I going to support them all? So I think that bottom-up view, rather than the top-down Whitehall view, I think is really important. And that's where I think local authorities, perhaps in collaboration with local universities and perhaps with other kind of far-sighted funders or developers, might be able to think about place in that holistic, inclusive way, because that's a rather different view from, I think, the kind of industrial strategy view, or indeed the venture capital view, where they have to be much more focused about the bets they place. So I think that's the key thing. So I think my answer is, I don't feel this is really understood, and I don't think this is really easy, but I think it is absolutely necessary. And I think the sort of tide is moving in the right direction of sort of where power will lie. But I think one of the things that's often argued is that many of these combined authorities now don't necessarily have a lot of expertise in this area. So, Michael and me and anyone else in this area actually have to educate an awful lot of the
champions like you guys,
local authorities. Say, hey, come, and this is where the physical tours actually make a difference. And my comment earlier about community, and you kind of come, experience, see, probably was quite different from what you thought. I mean, certainly when we would tour in one of our facilities, and I'm sure Michael as well, people leave going, wow, that was more than I expected, right? Yeah.
I never knew. I said, you can't just see, you've got to come and see it and smell it, because every workshop smells different, and it conjures up those memories of if you were doing design technology in the metalwork, or if you've ever worked in a textiles factory or whatever, like they smell different, they sound different, and then you see what people are building. It's really like you've read the PDF, now get on the train from Westminster, from Charing Cross, a couple of stops, or from here, you can see Lewisham, just stick out the window of the Shard. Come and see it in action. This is it. This is the embodiment of everything that you've been talking about, that you're funding. This is it. It's really happening. There are all these brilliant, talented people that if it were not for places like this, they would not be able to start their business. They would be taking a job somewhere in London, maybe, or they would be moving, back to another country. Or they would be trying to build their business with these like hockey stick projections and very risky route to take, and maybe they will fail. And if they do succeed, which always one or two do, they might end up going to, America, being bought. So like, we're just not supporting these talented, creative, entrepreneurial people right. And it is happening. Like, so yeah, people come and see it for themselves, and then they walk away and they get it.
Yeah, we've definitely seen it evolve, though. I mean, as I said, Central Research Laboratory started sort of in September 2015. That was the first cohort brought in. And I think in that time, in the 10 years, we were active in sort of accelerator as well as incubator. We saw really the growth of sort of health-based sort of solutions, often consumer health, sometimes mental health, sometimes physical health, and an awful lot of environmental, sort of positive environmental impact ones. So many biomaterials, trying to look at maybe more sort of lower carbon, more circular economy, less petrochemicals, so using natural waste stream. So it could be plant-based leather, or it could be fish-based plastic, or it could be sort of potato-based sequins, using very different waste streams to look at sort of fashion or packaging or all of these other sort of single-use or polluting things. And so again, I think it's not just the smell, as Michael was putting it, and the sort of the sense of industry. But actually, when you see what the ideas are, you go, I had no idea you could boil up, fish waste and red algae, as with Marinatex, and turn that into a transparent biofilm. And what are all, so again, I think it's quite magical, quite alchemical. I think it's sort of alchemy, seeing how the different robots or plastics can be made. Because again, I think it's something that isn't in people's daily lives anymore. We see many people tapping away at laptops in order to, in quotes, innovate. But we're much less familiar with the idea of, not since nylon in the 1950s and 60s have people found that idea of making materials to be magical. So it's, I think, again, that's why people, sort of the scales fall from their eyes when they do come and visit these places.
And it makes people realize that we live in a material world, as Madonna would say. So like you can't get away from the fact that, everything around us is manufactured, and somebody invented it, and somebody decided what materials to use, and all of the big challenges that we're facing are not going to be solved with apps. And so, and there are people who started off at a bench with some cardboard or mixing up some materials, and now a few years later they have big successful businesses. And we were just talking about the Earthshot Prize, for instance, which does a wonderful job at highlighting what can be achieved. The winners and the runner-ups, they're all like that. They were not long ago, they were just startup, student, or tabletop projects. And so I think that there is a new generation of makers, a new generation of consumers that want to buy locally, that want to have things made in the right way, and AI enables all of that. It's easier than ever. I mean, it's not nice to tell someone it's easier now than in my day, because in my day, obviously, it was easier than in the days before that. But it really is easier to start a business now and to, do one that is involved in hardware manufacturing than it ever was. So it's exciting.
Michael, we promised the listeners that we'd talk about Design Unlocked.
No.
Do you want to explain?
Industry Unlocked.
Industry Unlocked.
Yeah,
Industry Unlocked.
There we go. Great name.
It's a
great name, isn't
Just
it?
like the podcast, Innovation Unlocked.
Yeah, it's good. That's it. No other unlocks, just the two of us. So Blue Garage is the innovation hub, co-working space, delivering programs, and first site is in Lewisham. We're hoping to have other sites opening up soon. And I'm setting up a charity, initially a CIC, that will be breaking down the barriers that exist for so many talented, ambitious people that want to work in this space. And so it is going to be called Industry Unlocked. And Yeah, it's very exciting. So it's just there are so many people that I've spoken to. Actually, there's a lot of people I've spoken to it's gone over their head, but there are a few people who absolutely get it, who get that this is needed. And they may see that from the corporate perspective, from an investor, from a university, from a startup, and they just want to help and want to make this happen. And so that's why I've set up the charity, or soon to be charity. And yeah, this is a call for anybody that wants to support that. Obviously, financial support would be incredibly helpful, because this is a difficult space to be in if one is just charging the startups, because they tend to be underfunded and it's quite an expensive thing to provide, even though we're doing it in a very lean way, which creates a better culture when you do that. When people have to help each other out, you actually, they get more from it. It's a gym, it's not a spa. You get out what you put in. That's what I say, and that makes it a lot more affordable. But essentially, it still needs to be funded. But we can just really help the whole UK economy, the universities, corporates be more innovative if this industry unlocked exists and unlocks potential for so many people who currently don't have the access.
Yeah, brilliant. So guys, I think we're getting to time. So I just wanted to finish on one point. Matt, you were talking earlier about people walking past, looking through the windows. What would both your advice be to potential founders, potential students leaving university, right, who've got an idea? What would be your advice to those people?
I think knock on the door of one of these places, be it +X Innovation, Blue Garage, because I think, again, it just helps reveal the hidden networks of other entrepreneurs, of funders, helps you to sort out your idea. And I think, we're both passionate about helping the next generation come along. And so I think, so I'm certainly spending more time actually now. I'll be doing some tutoring at Central St Martin's, where I first studied industrial design to help the next generation come along.
Yeah.
So I think, this is a long-term play. This is, I've been doing this 10 years or more. It's going to take longer, but it is all about realize these places do exist, and please go knock on the door. You'll be heartily welcomed, as Michael has made very clear, I think.
And I think when you knock on the door, if you see that there are things there that are helpful, so maybe, wow, I want to be part of this community, or that equipment's amazing, or these connections that you've got, I want to have some of those connections, all very, very valid things to be thinking. I would say, now flip it and think, what can you give to that community? Everybody's got something that they can contribute, something that they can provide. So knock on the door and say, look, I love what you're doing. I want to help. I want to help with this or with that. And then that's the best way to get involved.
I mean, for my part, I think when I visit these places, whether it's Blue Garage, whether it's +X, CRL, I think the main thing that I am is inspired. I see these people doing it and I think, wow, actually, I'm really impressed they can do it. Why can't I? Or, so I think it just gives you that inspiration, gives you that courage to be like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll take that risk.
We wanted to be more normal. I mean, I was lucky to start my career in Silicon Valley, where I think it was sort of abnormal not to be in a startup, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, Michael and I were talking earlier about sort of the numbers of students or graduates in any cohort that do start their own business, as opposed to start a consultancy or be part of a consultancy or somewhere else. It's the absolute minority. So we just want it to be a little bit more normal to take the plunge, to make these sort of safer places to do risky things.
Definitely. Michael, Matt, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.